My wife joked during dinner. I fantasize about my ex-lover when we're together. I didn't finish my meal. I just walked to the garage. She started screaming when she realized what I drove away with underscore. Look, I'm not saying I saw it coming, but when your wife starts a sentence with "sometimes I fantasize" during Tuesday night dinner, you know damn well you're not about to hear about a vacation to Cabo or finally remodeling the bathroom. Nope. You're about to get hit with something that'll make you question every life choice you've made since you thought a disco ball at your wedding was ironic and fun. So there I was, fork halfway to my mouth, a perfectly good piece of roast chicken just hovering in the air like it was waiting for permission to continue existing. Lauren was sitting across from me, swirling her wine glass like she was some kind of sommelier instead of a woman who buys whatever bottle has the prettiest label at Target. Her phone was face down on the table. First red flag, by the way, and she had this smirk on her face. You know the one. That practiced, deliberate smirk that women perfect in front of bathroom mirrors, the kind that says, "I'm about to ruin your whole week, and I'm going to enjoy watching it happen." Sometimes, she said, taking a slow, dramatic sip of her Pinot Grigio like she was delivering a monologue in some indie film nobody asked for, "I fantasize about my ex when we're together." The fork stopped. Not dropped, stopped. There's a difference. Dropping implies shock, loss of control, maybe even vulnerability. Stopping? Stopping means your brain just hit the emergency brake and is currently running diagnostics on what the hell just happened. I didn't shout, didn't slam my hand on the table, didn't even blink for what felt like a solid 10 seconds. I just stared at her, then slowly, very slowly, looked down at our dog Bruno under the table. Even he looked personally offended, like he couldn't believe the audacity of what just went down in his presence. "Cool," I said finally, setting the fork down with the kind of precision you use when you're trying real hard not to flip a table. "You want dessert? Or should I just start packing now?" She laughed. Actually laughed. Like this was some cute, quirky confession you make on a road trip, not a tactical nuke dropped in the middle of mashed potatoes and green beans. She thought she was being playful, maybe even a little sexy in that, "Ooh, I'm so mysterious and complicated" way that honestly just screams, "I read too many articles about spicing up your marriage on websites that also sell essential oils." I smiled back. Not a real smile. Oh no. This was the smile. The one that says, "Oh, sweetheart, you just made a miscalculation so massive that NASA could probably detect it from space." The smile that means you've just crossed a line you didn't even know existed, and now you're about to find out what's on the other side of it. I picked up my napkin. Linen, because Lauren insisted we're not animals, and folded it neatly beside my plate. That's when I saw it. The little flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. See, usually when she dropped these little grenades into conversation, I'd react. I'd argue, defend myself, maybe get a little loud, definitely get defensive. That was the script. That was what she expected. Drama, emotion, maybe some tears, followed by makeup sex and pretending nothing happened. But this time, nothing. Just calm. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes even the air in the room nervous, like it's afraid to move because it might set something off. I stood up, pushed my chair in, again, because we're not animals, and looked at her with the kind of expression you give someone when you're mentally already somewhere else entirely. "Thanks for dinner," I said, voice steady as a rock. It was enlightening. Bruno scrambled out from under the table and followed me like he knew exactly what was about to go down. Smart dog. Always knew he had better instincts than me. Lauren just sat there, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips, watching me walk toward the hallway with this confused look on her face, like she couldn't quite figure out why the scene wasn't playing out the way she'd rehearsed it in her head. "Max," she called after me, voice doing that thing where it goes up at the end, trying to sound casual, but you can hear the panic creeping in around the edges. "Where are you going?" It was just a joke. God, you're so sensitive. Sensitive. Right. Because the appropriate response to, "I think about my ex while we're having sex," is apparently to laugh it off and ask if she wants ice cream. I didn't answer. Didn't even turn around. Just kept walking, Bruno's nails clicking on the hardwood behind me, both of us heading toward the one place in this house that actually felt like mine. The garage. My sanctuary. My church. The only room in this house where I didn't have to pretend to care about throw pillows or whether the hand towels matched the shower curtain. The place where the air smelled like motor oil and metal and freedom, instead of whatever vanilla lavender nonsense Lauren bought from that candle store at the mall that charges $28 for artisanal wax. I hit the light switch, and there she was, sitting under her cover like Sleeping Beauty, waiting for true love's kiss. My 1970 Firebird, cherry red, polished to the point where you could see God's own reflection in the hood. Lauren called it my midlife crisis. I called it cheaper than therapy and way more reliable than you've been lately. Funny how she never complained about it when she wanted to take Instagram photos posing next to it, claiming it was ours to her friends like she'd contributed anything more than criticism to its restoration. I pulled the cover off slowly, letting it slide across the paint job I'd spent 3 years perfecting. Every curve, every line, every inch of chrome. This was art. This was purpose. This was something that didn't talk back, didn't play mind games, and sure as hell didn't fantasize about its previous owner while running. I climbed in, settled into the driver's seat that had molded perfectly to my body over countless hours of work and weekend drives. The leather creaked in that familiar way, welcoming me home. My hand found the key in the ignition, because I always kept it there, despite Lauren's lectures about security, and I turned it. The Firebird growled to life. Not purred, growled. Deep, confident, rebellious, like a middle finger in auditory form. Kind of like me before marriage, back when I actually had a backbone and made decisions based on what I wanted instead of what would avoid an argument. I pressed the garage door opener and watched it rise slowly, dramatically, like a curtain going up on the first act of a play I was finally ready to star in. No screeching tires. No slammed doors. No theatrics. Just smooth, deliberate movement. The kind that says this isn't a tantrum. This isn't me being sensitive. This is a man who just hit his limit and is now rebooting his entire operating system. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the kitchen window. Lauren's silhouette appeared, backlit and blurry, probably standing there with her wine glass trying to figure out if this was real or just me being dramatic. Here's a hint, sweetheart. I stopped being dramatic when you stopped being faithful in your thoughts. I put the Firebird in reverse, and as the engine rumbled beneath me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity, purpose, the absolute certainty that whatever happened next, I was finally making a decision that was 100% mine. And as I backed out of that garage, leaving behind the house and the wife and the life that had become more performance than reality, I smiled. A real smile this time, because sitting on the passenger seat, waiting patiently for its moment, was a manila envelope. Inside it, the car title, the house deed, a few bank statements from our joint account that she thought I was too stupid or too trusting to monitor. Everything she thought she had leverage over, everything she thought would keep me in line, all neatly organized and ready to remind her of something very important. I might have been playing dumb, but I damn sure wasn't stupid. The garage wasn't just a garage. It was my church, my therapy office, my man cave, and my escape pod all rolled into one glorious, oil-stained sanctuary. While Lauren filled the house with motivational quotes on reclaimed wood signs that said garbage like live, laugh, love, and blessed beyond measure, I had my own gospel out here. It was written in torque specs, vintage car magazines, and the kind of silence that doesn't judge you for eating cold pizza at 2 in the morning while contemplating your life choices. The smell hit me the second I walked in. Motor oil, metal shavings, old leather, and something I can only describe as mechanical freedom. It's the scent of a place where things make sense, where problems have solutions that don't involve communicating better or being more present. Out here, if something's broken, you fix it. You don't sit around having feelings about it or posting cryptic Facebook statuses hoping someone will ask you what's wrong. I stood there for a moment, just breathing it in, letting the garage work its magic. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that slightly greenish glow that makes everything look like it's part of some noir film. Tools hung on pegboards with almost religious precision. Every wrench, every socket, every screwdriver in its designated spot. Lauren used to mock me for that, said I was obsessive. I called it knowing where my damn tools are, which is apparently a controversial concept in a house where she loses her keys 17 times a week, but somehow that's my fault for not reminding her where she put them. Under the custom car cover, sitting like a sleeping dragon waiting to be awakened, was my baby, my pride and joy. My ticket to sanity in a world that seemed designed to drive men absolutely insane. The 1970 Firebird, cherry red with white racing stripes, chrome so polished you could perform surgery using the reflection, and an engine that purred like it had been kissed by the gods of American muscle themselves. I walked around her slowly, running my hand along the cover before pulling it off. This wasn't just some car. This was 3 years of weekends, 3 years of YouTube tutorials watched at midnight, 3 years of bloody knuckles and backaches, and small victories that added up to something magnificent. I'd bought her as a rusted shell from some guy's barn upstate, hauled her home on a trailer while Lauren complained the entire 2-hour drive about how I was wasting money on junk. Junk. This masterpiece was junk. Meanwhile, she'd spent $4,000 on a couch we weren't allowed to sit on because it was decorative and an investment piece. You know what's an investment? Something that increases in value. This Firebird was worth 3 times what I paid for it now. That couch. Probably worth half after the dog threw up on it that one time, but we don't talk about that. I pulled the cover completely off and folded it carefully, because this car deserved respect. The paint job gleamed under the garage lights. I'd done it myself, spending weeks wet sanding and buffing until my arms felt like they were going to fall off. Every panel was straight, every gap was perfect, every detail was exactly how it should be. This wasn't some half-assed restoration job. This was art. This was love in automotive form. Lauren never understood it. She'd come out here sometimes, usually when she wanted something, and look at the Firebird like it was competition. Which, let's be honest, it kind of was. The car never complained when I spent time with it. Never told me I wasn't emotionally available enough. Never fantasized about its previous owner during quality time together. The Firebird and I had an understanding. I took care of it, and it gave me purpose. Simple. Clean. No hidden meanings or passive-aggressive comments disguised as jokes. I opened the driver's side door and slid into the seat, and it was like coming home after a long, exhausting trip to somewhere you never wanted to go in the first place. The leather had molded to my body perfectly over the hundreds of hours I'd spent in here, sometimes working, sometimes just sitting and thinking, sometimes hiding from conversations I didn't want to have about why I didn't want to go to her friend Melissa's essential oils party. My hands found the steering wheel, gripping it like it was an old friend. And in a way, it was. This wheel had been there for the good times and the bad. It had been there when Eli graduated high school, and I needed a minute to process how fast time flies. It had been there when my dad passed away, and I couldn't cry in front of Lauren because she'd make it about her somehow. It had been there every single time I needed something in my life to be solid, reliable, and honest. I reached for the key, always left in the ignition despite Lauren's lectures about security and property values and what the neighbors might think. Out here, I made the rules. Out here, I didn't have to justify or explain or defend my choices. The key was cold against my fingers, familiar and perfect. I turned it. The Firebird didn't just start, she announced herself. The engine roared to life with that deep, throaty growl that you feel in your chest as much as you hear with your ears. It wasn't some quiet, efficient modern engine that sounded like an angry vacuum cleaner. This was American muscle, baby. This was raw power and attitude and the audible equivalent of not giving a single damn about fuel efficiency or environmental impact or any of the other things people pretend to care about while driving their overpriced SUVs to Whole Foods. The whole garage seemed to vibrate with approval as the engine settled into its rhythm. I pressed the gas pedal gently, listening to her respond, feeling the power waiting to be unleashed. This was better than meditation, better than therapy, better than any conversation I'd had in the last 5 years combined. For the first time since that dinner table disaster, my heartbeat synced with something that didn't judge me, didn't play games, didn't have hidden agendas. Just pure, honest mechanical symphony. The kind of connection that reminded me I used to be someone before I became Lauren's husband, or the guy who needs to work on his communication skills. I used to be Max. Just Max. The guy who rebuilt engines for fun, who could drive stick shift before he could legally drink, who made decisions based on what he wanted instead of what would avoid an argument. The guy who had a backbone and opinions and didn't apologize for taking up space in his own damn life. That Max had been buried under years of yes, dear, and whatever you think is best, and I'm sorry you feel that way. But sitting here, engine rumbling beneath me, I could feel him waking up, stretching, getting ready to reclaim some territory. I reached over and pressed the garage door opener mounted on the visor. The door began to rise with a mechanical whir that sounded like opportunity knocking. Slowly, dramatically, like a curtain going up on opening night. The cool evening air rushed in, bringing with it the smell of suburban normalcy, cut grass, backyard grills, families eating dinner without dropping emotional bombs on each other. Through the expanding gap, I could see the driveway, the street, the whole world beyond this garage. Freedom, right there, just waiting for me to accept the invitation. No screeching tires, no dramatic exits, no doors slamming or yelling or any of the theatrical nonsense that Lauren would expect. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't me being sensitive or overreacting. This was something way more terrifying for her. This was me being calm, being deliberate, being the kind of quiet that doesn't come from weakness but from a man who just made a decision and doesn't need anyone's approval to execute it. I put the Firebird in reverse, feeling the transmission engage with that solid clunk that modern cars just don't have anymore. Everything about this car was honest, straightforward, real. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It didn't play games or test you to see how much you cared. It just was what it was, pure, unfiltered awesome. As I started to back out, I glanced at the passenger seat. There, sitting pretty like it had been waiting for this exact moment, was a manila envelope. Inside it was everything she thought she had control over. Everything she assumed I was too trusting or too stupid or too emotionally unavailable to pay attention to. The Firebird rolled backward smoothly, and I couldn't help but smile. Not the fake smile from dinner. Not the polite smile I'd perfected over years of nodding through her stories about coworker drama I didn't care about. This was real. This was the smile of a man who just remembered he's not actually powerless in his own life. And as the garage door framed the night sky behind me like a movie screen, I whispered to nobody in particular, "Game on, sweetheart." The Firebird growled in agreement. The rearview mirror is a funny thing. It shows you what you're leaving behind, sure, but it also gives you a front row seat to watch people realize they just screwed up in real time. And let me tell you, watching Lauren's face progress through the 5 stages of "oh crap" was more satisfying than any apology she could have offered. I'd barely backed the Firebird halfway down the driveway when the porch light flicked on. Not the normal, gentle glow of someone stepping outside to check the weather. No, this was the aggressive flick of someone who just realized the script wasn't being followed and needed to reassert control immediately. The light flooded the front yard like a prison searchlight, and there she was, Lauren in all her wine-fueled glory, standing on the porch in that silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas because apparently regular robes are for people who've given up on themselves. One hand was planted firmly on her hip in that universal pose women use when they're about to deliver a lecture they think you deserve. The other hand, still clutching that wine glass like it was a trophy she'd won for most dramatic reaction to basic consequences. Her hair was still perfect, because God forbid a minor marital crisis mess up her blowout. Priorities, you know? "Really, Max?" she yelled across the yard, her voice doing that thing where it gets all sharp and nasally, like a smoke detector running low on batteries. "You're pouting in the garage again? Grow up." Pouting. That's what she called it. Like I was some teenager sulking because I didn't get my way, instead of a grown man who just got told his wife thinks about her ex-boyfriend during intimate moments. But sure, I'm the immature one here. Makes total sense. Maybe next time I'll just pat her on the head and thank her for being so honest about her emotional infidelity. That would be the grown-up thing to do, right? I didn't respond. Didn't even look directly at her. Just kept the Firebird rolling backward nice and smooth. My eyes on the mirrors, my hand steady on the wheel. The engine rumbled underneath me like it was laughing at her, which honestly made 2 of us. She took a step forward, off the porch now, her bare feet on the driveway because she was too worked up to bother with shoes. "Where do you think you're going?" she shouted, louder this time, adding that edge of panic that creeps into someone's voice when they realize their usual tactics aren't landing. "You're being ridiculous." It was a joke, Max. A joke. Ah yes, the classic "it was just a joke" defense. Right up there with "you're too sensitive" and "I was just being honest" in the Hall of Fame of things people say when they want to hurt you but don't want to face any consequences for it. Schrodinger's statement, both serious and a joke simultaneously, depending on which interpretation gets them out of trouble. But here's the thing she didn't understand. couldn't understand, because Lauren had spent our entire marriage operating under the assumption that I would always eventually cave. That no matter what she said or did, I'd cool off, come back, and we'd pretend nothing happened. That was the pattern. That was the deal. She'd push boundaries. I'd get upset. She'd either apologize or convince me I was overreacting, and we'd reset until the next time. Except this time was different, and I could see in her face, even from this distance, even in the weird yellow glow of that porch light, that she was starting to realize it. The way her posture shifted slightly, less aggressive and more uncertain. The way her free hand dropped from her hip and kind of hovered in the air like it didn't know what to do with itself. The way her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find the right words to reel me back in, but couldn't quite locate them. Because I wasn't pouting. I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I wasn't doing any of the emotional labor she'd come to expect and count on. I was just leaving. Calmly. Deliberately. With purpose. And that terrified her. I shifted the Firebird into drive, and that's when I allowed myself a small smile. Not for her benefit. She couldn't see it from where she was standing. This smile was just for me. The smile of a man who'd been playing chess while everyone assumed he was playing checkers. The smile of someone who'd been called paranoid for years, but turned out to be prepared instead. See, sitting on the passenger seat next to me, riding shotgun like the world's most important co-pilot, was that manila envelope I mentioned earlier. And inside that envelope wasn't just random papers I'd grabbed in a panic. Oh no. Inside that envelope was 3 years of very careful, very deliberate preparation. The car title for the Firebird, registered under my small restoration business, Maxwell Ford Restorations, LLC. A business I'd started as a hobby, according to Lauren, who'd rolled her eyes every time I mentioned it, but had been more than happy to pose next to the cars for her Instagram, claiming partial credit for my work. A business that was legally mine, solely mine, with documentation so airtight it could survive a nuclear blast. The house deed, which Lauren assumed was in both our names, because why wouldn't it be? Except it wasn't. It was held in a family trust under my sister Rachel's name, set up years ago when Lauren took that girl's trip to Miami that looked suspiciously like a couple's resort based on the photos that accidentally included male hands that definitely weren't mine in the backgrounds. Rachel thought I was paranoid. I told her I was protecting my assets. Turns out we were both right. And then there were the bank statements from our joint account. The one we both had access to, the one where our paychecks got deposited, the one she thought she could rely on to maintain her lifestyle of overpriced candles and brunch dates that cost more than my monthly car insurance. Except what she didn't know, because she never actually looked at the fine print of anything she signed, was that the account had some very specific clauses built in. Clauses that activated under certain conditions. Clauses that I could trigger whenever I felt it was necessary. And tonight felt pretty necessary. I could see her in the mirror, standing in the middle of the driveway now, wine glass still in hand, like she was frozen in some suburban tableau of marital discord. Her mouth was moving. She was probably still yelling, but I turned up the radio just enough that her voice got drowned out by classic rock. Nothing says, "I'm done with your nonsense," quite like letting Lynyrd Skynyrd's Free Bird provide the soundtrack to your exit. The symbolism was not lost on me. In fact, I was pretty proud of it. As I reached the end of the driveway, I did something I'd never done before in all our years of arguments. I didn't look back with guilt, didn't second-guess myself, didn't feel that familiar knot in my stomach that came from wondering if I was being too harsh or unreasonable. I just adjusted my rear-view mirror, angling it so I could see the road behind me instead of the chaos I was leaving, smiled to myself, and did something that felt absolutely perfect in the moment. "Alexa," I said to the smart speaker I'd installed in the Firebird's custom sound system, "play Highway to Hell." The opening guitar riff kicked in immediately, filling the car with that iconic sound that's been the anthem of bad decisions and good times since before I was born. AC/DC understood something fundamental about life. Sometimes you gotta take the highway to hell, because the road to heaven is full of people telling you what you should and shouldn't do. I pressed the gas pedal, and the Firebird responded like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. The engine roared, the tires gripped the asphalt, and we launched forward into the night like a rocket fueled by justified pettiness and long overdue self-respect. In the mirror, getting smaller by the second, I could see Lauren. She'd dropped the wine glass. I heard it shatter even over the music, and was just standing there, both hands on her head in that universal gesture of, what the hell just happened? The porch light illuminated her like a spotlight on a stage, and she was the star of a one-woman show titled Actions Have Consequences, a tragedy in one act. I turned the corner at the end of our street, and just like that, she disappeared from view. The house disappeared. The whole life I'd been living for the past however many years just vanished in the rearview mirror. And you know what? I felt absolutely nothing but relief. The night air rushed through the window I'd cracked open, bringing with it the smell of possibilities and freedom. And what happens next? The Firebird hummed beneath me, steady and true, taking me wherever the hell I decided to go. Because that was the beauty of this moment. I got to decide. Not we. Not, let me check with Lauren first. Just me. I merged onto the highway, watching the speedometer climb as the Firebird stretched her legs on the open road. The city lights blurred past, each one representing a life I wasn't living, a choice I hadn't made, a version of myself I'd buried under years of compromise and yes, dear, and pretending I didn't notice things I definitely noticed. My phone started buzzing in the cup holder. Text messages, probably. Or calls. Definitely from her. Definitely escalating from confused to angry to that weird combination of apologetic and aggressive that she'd perfected over the years. I glanced at it, watched it light up and vibrate like an angry bee trapped in plastic, and made the easiest decision I'd made all night. I didn't answer. And somewhere behind me, in a house that suddenly felt a lot emptier than it had an hour ago, Lauren was probably just starting to understand that when you tell your husband you fantasize about your ex, you better make damn sure he doesn't have an exit strategy already in place. Plot twist, sweetheart, I did. Lauren expected me back in 10 minutes. Maybe 20 if I was really committed to the dramatic exit. 30 tops if I stopped for gas and wanted to make a point. What she got instead was 10 hours of pure, uninterrupted silence. The kind of silence that starts out annoying, graduates to concerning, and eventually settles into that special flavor of panic that tastes like regret mixed with the dawning realization that you might have actually screwed up for real this time. I know this because she documented every stage of it through text messages that I watched pile up on my phone like some kind of digital meltdown in real time. It was honestly better than Netflix. More dramatic than any reality TV show. Just pure, unfiltered panic presented in chronological order with declining spelling accuracy as the night wore on. 8:47 p.m. Okay, you made your point. Come home. No question mark. Just a command. Because in Lauren's world, this was still just a minor inconvenience, a small bump in the road that would resolve itself once I got over my sensitivity. She probably poured herself another glass of wine and settled onto that $4,000 decorative couch, confident I'd come slinking back with my tail between my legs within the hour. 9:23 p.m. Max, this is childish. Ah, there it is. The "you're being childish" card. Right on schedule. This is the go-to move when women want to make you feel bad for having boundaries or, God forbid, actually responding to something hurtful they did. Not, "I'm sorry for what I said." Not, "Maybe I crossed a line." Just straight to, "You're the problem for reacting to the thing I did." 9:58 p.m. Where are you? Answer your phone. 2 question marks now. The panic's setting in. She'd probably called at least a dozen times by now, each one going straight to voicemail, because I'd turned off the ringer and put the phone face down in the cup holder. Out of sight, out of mind. Just me, the Firebird, and the open road stretching out like a promise of better things to come. 10:34 p.m. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. Classic. When childish doesn't work, pivot to overreacting. Because fantasizing about your ex during intimate moments with your husband is totally normal and fine. But driving away from the situation? That's crazy. That's excessive. That's me being dramatic. The mental gymnastics required to reach this conclusion probably burned more calories than she had all week. 11:17 p.m. Fine. Stay out all night. See if I care. Oh, she cares. She definitely cares. You can tell by the fact that she's still texting. If she really didn't care, the messages would have stopped hours ago. But no, she needed me to know she didn't care, which is pretty much the most obvious sign that someone absolutely cares. It's like saying, "I'm not mad," while slamming cabinet doors. The words say one thing, but the energy says something completely different. 12:43 a.m. Max, please just tell me you're okay. And there's the shift. From anger to concern. From commands to requests. Notice the lowercase please though. She's concerned, but not quite concerned enough to use proper capitalization. We're at like 60% genuine worry, 40% still annoyed that I'm not following the script. 2:19 a.m. Are you with someone? Is that what this is about? Oh, this is my favorite. The projection. See, when people accuse you out of nowhere of doing something specific, it's usually because they're either doing it themselves or thinking about doing it. Are you with someone is code for, I'm suddenly very aware that betraying your partner is a thing people do, and now I'm paranoid you might be doing it to me as payback. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 3:52 a.m. I'm calling the police. No, she wasn't. This is the empty threat stage. The I'm telling mom of adult arguments. She wasn't calling anyone at 3:52 in the morning to report that her husband went for a drive after she told him she fantasizes about her ex. Can you imagine that 911 call? Yes, officer, my husband left the house after I was emotionally unfaithful. I'd like to report a crime. They'd hang up on her. 5:15 a.m. You better not be doing something stupid. Too late, sweetheart. I did something stupid years ago when I ignored all the red flags and thought love could fix personality disorders. But tonight I was doing something smart. Something I should have done a long time ago. Meanwhile, while I was collecting these text messages like Pokemon cards, I was having the time of my life. I'd driven to this 24-hour diner about 40 miles outside town. The kind of place that still has actual pie rotating in a display case and waitresses who call you Han, without it being ironic. I ordered tacos at 2 a.m. because I could. Because nobody was there to tell me that tacos weren't dinner appropriate, or that eating after 8 p.m. would mess with my metabolism. I sat in a corner booth that had seen better decades, eating mediocre tacos that tasted like absolute freedom, and for the first time in years, I felt like the main character in my own life instead of a supporting actor in Lauren's drama. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A trucker 3 booths down was falling asleep over his coffee. The waitress was reading a romance novel behind the counter. And me? I was eating tacos at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and feeling like I'd just won the lottery. This, right here, was what living felt like. Not the Instagram version where everything's filtered and staged and designed to make other people jealous. Just the raw, unpolished, real version where you make choices based on what you want instead of what you're supposed to want. Back at home, and I use that term loosely now, Lauren was apparently doing some detective work. Because around 6 a.m., the text took a sharp turn. 6:04 a.m. Where is the safe? All caps. No punctuation. This was it. This was the moment she went from worried wife to panicked accountant. She'd finally gotten up, probably hungover from all that wine, and decided to check on things. Maybe she was going to grab some cash too. I don't know. Hire a private investigator? Buy a voodoo doll? Who knows how her mind works? But the safe, my safe, the one I'd installed in the garage for tools and important papers, was gone. Not empty. Gone. Because I'd unbolted it from the floor 3 days ago and loaded it into a storage unit across town. You know, just in case. 6:07 a.m. Max, what did you do? 6:08 a.m. The garage is empty. 6:09 a.m. Where is my car? Her car. That's funny. See, that silver Lexus she loved so much, the one she insisted we buy even though it cost more than my entire Firebird restoration, the one she claimed made her feel successful. Well, that car was registered under Maxwell Ford Restorations, LLC. For tax purposes, obviously. Totally legitimate business expense. And it was currently parked in that same storage unit, next to the safe, waiting patiently for phase 2 of this operation. 6:12 a.m. You can't do this. Oh, but I could. I absolutely could. And I had. That's the beautiful thing about actually reading the paperwork you sign instead of just scribbling your name wherever someone points. That's the benefit of having a lawyer friend who likes bourbon and hates seeing good guys get screwed over in divorces. 6:15 a.m. I am calling my lawyer. Go ahead. Call him. I'm sure he'll love getting a phone call at 6:15 on a Wednesday morning to hear about how your husband drove away with assets that were legally his to begin with. I'm sure he'll be very sympathetic while charging you $400 an hour to tell you that you don't have a case. The texts continued. but they got less coherent as the morning wore on. By 7 a.m., she was sending voice memos, which I didn't listen to, but I could see they were getting progressively longer. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes. That last one was probably just her crying into the phone, which honestly, join the club, Lauren. I'd cried plenty over the years. Welcome to the party. I finally left the diner around 8 a.m., tipped the waitress way too much because good service in the middle of an existential crisis deserves recognition, and got back in the Firebird. The sun was coming up, painting the sky in these ridiculous shades of orange and pink that looked like a motivational poster. New beginnings or some garbage like that. But you know what? For once, the motivational poster wasn't lying. My phone buzzed again. Another text. I glanced at it while I waited for the engine to warm up. 8:23 a.m. Everyone is going to know what you did. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in the parking lot of a diner that smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. Everyone was going to know what I did. Perfect. Let them know. Let her tell everyone that I left after she admitted to fantasizing about her ex. Let her explain to her friends why the house is in a trust and the cars are registered to my business. Let her try to play the victim while simultaneously explaining what led to this moment. I put the Firebird in gear and started heading back toward town. Not home, not yet, but close enough to watch the fallout from a safe distance. Because the thing about going nuclear is that you gotta stick around to see the mushroom cloud. And based on those texts, this one was going to be spectacular. I pulled onto the highway, morning commuters starting to crowd the lanes, all of them heading to jobs they probably hated to pay for lives they'd settled for. Not me. Not anymore. I merged into traffic, turned up the radio, and smiled. 10 hours of silence. 10 hours of Lauren slowly realizing that she'd been playing checkers while I'd been playing chess. And the game? It was just getting started. Here's the thing about being called paranoid. Eventually, you just lean into it. You stop defending yourself and start documenting everything instead. You stop arguing that you're not crazy and start building contingency plans that would make a Cold War strategist weep with pride. And when the moment finally comes, when everything you prepared for actually happens, well, that's when paranoia gets rebranded as being prepared, and suddenly you're the genius instead of the lunatic. I've been called paranoid before. Many times, actually. Mostly by Lauren, but also by her friends during those dinner parties where they'd have one too many glasses of wine and start psychoanalyzing everyone's relationships like they all had PhDs in marriage counseling instead of marketing degrees and unresolved daddy issues. Max is so paranoid, Lauren would laugh. Usually while telling some story, she twisted just enough to make me look unreasonable. He keeps copies of everything. Every receipt, every document, every text message. It's like living with someone who thinks the FBI is after him. Her friends would laugh. They'd make jokes about tinfoil hats and conspiracy theories. They'd exchange those knowing glances that said, "Poor Lauren, married to a weirdo." And I'd sit there, smile politely, and think, just wait. Keep laughing. We'll see who's crazy when the smoke clears. My personal preference? I called it prepared. And prepared I was. See, this whole thing didn't start last night at dinner. This started 3 years ago, after Lauren's third girls' trip that looked suspiciously like something that wasn't actually a girls' trip at all. She'd gone to this resort in Turks and Caicos, 5 days, 4 nights, supposedly with her college friends Melissa and Jenna. Lots of beach photos. Lots of sunset shots. Lots of cocktails with little umbrellas in them. But then there were the other photos. The ones in the background of group shots. The ones where you could see reflections in windows or mirrors. The ones where male hands that definitely weren't attached to waiters kept appearing in frame. The ones where her girls' trip looked an awful lot like a couple's retreat that she forgot to mention I was supposed to be part of. When she got back, I asked about it. Casual. No accusations. Just, hey, noticed some guys in the photos. Who were they? Oh, just some people we met at the resort, she'd said, waving it off like it was nothing. You know how these places are? Everyone just mingles. Sure. Everyone mingles. And everyone shares intimate sunset dinners based on those photos too, apparently. But I didn't push it. Didn't start a fight. Didn't demand answers or issue ultimatums. Instead, I did something way more useful. I called my lawyer. Eddie Richardson had been my buddy since high school. We'd played football together, suffered through calculus together, and stayed friends even after he went off to law school and became one of those guys who actually uses words like fiduciary in casual conversation. He specialized in asset protection and business law, which basically meant he helped people keep their money when relationships went sideways. We met at a bar, because all good legal strategies start with bourbon, apparently, and I laid it out for him. Not everything. Not the photos or the suspicions or the growing pit in my stomach that said my marriage was circling the drain. Just the basics. Eddie, I said, hypothetically speaking, if a guy wanted to protect his assets in case things went south with his wife, what would that look like? Eddie took a sip of his whiskey, gave me that look lawyers give when they know exactly what you're really asking but appreciate that you're being discreet about it, and said, hypothetically, that guy would want to start a business. An LLC. Keep things separate. Clean. So that's what I did. Maxwell Ford Restorations, LLC was born on a Tuesday afternoon in Eddie's office, filed with the state by Wednesday, and operational by Friday. On paper, it was a side business for restoring classic cars. I'd buy them, fix them up, sell them for profit. Totally legitimate. Totally legal. The kind of thing plenty of guys do as a hobby that occasionally makes money. But what it really was. A firewall. A legal entity that existed separately from me and Lauren. Anything registered under the business was business property, not marital property. That Firebird I'd been restoring? Business asset. The tools in the garage? Business equipment. That Lexus Lauren loved so much. Company car for tax purposes. Eddie walked me through every step, made sure everything was airtight, and at the end of it all, he leaned back in his chair and said, Max, you plan like you expect betrayal. I'd looked at him, thought about those photos from Turks and Caicos, thought about the way Lauren had been pulling away for months, thought about all the little signs I'd been ignoring because it was easier than dealing with reality, and I said, Eddie, I'm married. I don't expect betrayal. I prepare for it. He'd laughed at that. Clinked his glass against mine. Smart man, he said. Most guys wait until they're already screwed before they call me. You're playing the long game. The long game. That's exactly what it was. Phase 2 came 6 months later when I convinced Lauren that we should set up a family trust for the house. Sold it as an estate planning thing, a way to protect our assets. Make sure everything was handled properly if something happened to either of us. Very responsible. Very adult. Very boring. Which meant she didn't read any of it too carefully before signing. What she didn't notice, because she never actually read legal documents, just skimmed for where to sign, was that the trust was established under my sister Rachel's name as the trustee. Rachel, who lived 3 states away. Rachel, who couldn't stand Lauren and had been telling me for years that I deserved better. Rachel, who would absolutely side with me if things ever went nuclear. The house wasn't jointly owned. It was trust property, and the trust had very specific conditions about occupancy, modifications, and transfer of ownership. Conditions that I'd carefully crafted with Eddie during several more bourbon-fueled planning sessions. You're really committed to this, Rachel had said when I explained it to her. Are you sure things are that bad? Not yet, I told her. But I'm not waiting until they are to get my ducks in a row. She'd signed on as trustee without hesitation. Family loyalty, right? Phase 3 was the trickiest, the bank accounts. You can't just hide money or move it around without raising red flags, especially not when you're married and supposedly sharing everything. But what you can do is set up accounts with very specific terms and conditions. The kind of fine print that people sign without reading because their lawyer assures them it's all standard. Our joint account wasn't quite as joint as Lauren thought. Sure, both our paychecks went in there. Sure, we both had cards and access. But buried in the account agreement, the one she'd signed while distracted by her phone, barely glancing at the pages, were clauses. Beautiful, legally binding clauses that essentially said the account required mutual consent for certain actions. What kind of actions? Oh, withdrawals over a certain amount, transfers to external accounts, changes to beneficiaries, that sort of thing. And if consent was withdrawn by either party, the account would freeze pending resolution. Guess who had the ability to withdraw consent with a single phone call? This guy? Eddie had been particularly proud of that one. It's not hiding assets, he'd explained. It's just implementing very thorough account security. For both your protection. Sure, Eddie. Whatever helps you sleep at night. All of this, the business, the trust, the accounts, had been put in place over 3 years. 3 years of quietly, methodically building a fortress around everything I'd worked for. 3 years of being called paranoid and obsessive and too focused on worst-case scenarios. And Lauren? She never noticed. She was too busy posting on social media about our perfect life and having brunch with her friends and apparently fantasizing about her ex-boyfriend to pay attention to what her paranoid husband was doing with legal documents and business filings. Every time I brought home paperwork for her to sign, I'd frame it as something boring. Estate planning, tax optimization, refinancing. She'd barely look at it. Just scribble her signature wherever I indicated and go back to whatever was more interesting at the moment. You handle all the boring stuff, she'd said once, like it was a compliment. I don't have the patience for all that legal mumbo-jumbo. No, you don't, sweetheart. And that's exactly what I was counting on. Eddie used to joke that I was the most prepared client he'd ever had. Most people come to me after the affair, he'd say. After the blow-up. After everything's already a mess. You're out here playing 4D chess, while everyone else is still learning checkers. I'd always laugh it off, say I was just being careful, just protecting myself. But the truth was darker than that. The truth was that somewhere deep down, I'd known this was coming. Maybe not the specific words she'd use. Maybe not the exact moment it would happen. But I'd known that eventually, Lauren would do something that would force my hand. That eventually, all this preparation would be necessary. And last night, when she sat across from me at that dinner table and casually mentioned fantasizing about her ex, that was it. That was the moment 3 years of preparation had been leading to. Some people might call that paranoid. Some people might say I was looking for an excuse, waiting for justification to pull the trigger on plans I'd already made. Those people would be right. But here's what those people don't understand. Sometimes being paranoid and being smart are the same thing. Sometimes preparing for the worst isn't pessimistic, it's practical. Sometimes the person everyone thinks is crazy is actually the only one who sees reality clearly. I thought about all of this as I drove around that Wednesday morning, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, checking my phone occasionally to see Lauren's increasingly frantic messages pile up. All that planning, all that preparation, all those hours with Eddie, going over documents and strategies and contingencies. It had all led to this moment. Me, in my Firebird, legally protected and financially secure, watching my marriage implode from a safe distance. Eddie called me around 9 a.m. Dude, he said without preamble, please tell me you didn't. I did, I said. All of it. Every bit. There was a pause. Then he started laughing. You magnificent bastard. 3 years. You waited 3 years. Good things come to those who wait, I replied. She's going to lose her mind, Eddie said, still laughing. Yeah, I agreed, smiling at my reflection in the rearview mirror. She really is. And somewhere behind me, in a house she thought she owned, with cars she thought were hers, and access to accounts she thought she controlled, Lauren was discovering exactly what happens when you underestimate the paranoid guy who handles all the boring stuff. Turns out, paranoid isn't such a bad thing to be after all. By day 2, Lauren had apparently decided that the best way to handle a marital crisis was to pretend it wasn't happening. You know, the ostrich approach to problem solving. Stick your head in the sand, act like everything's fine, and maybe reality will get bored and go bother someone else. I know this because I have sources. Well, one source, her friend Jenna, who happened to be married to my buddy Mike from the gym. And Jenna? Jenna couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. She was like a human news ticker, constantly broadcasting everyone's business to anyone who'd listen. Lauren knew this, of course, but kept her around anyway because having disloyal friends is apparently better than having no friends at all. Mike texted me around 10 a.m. Dude, Lauren's taking the girls to brunch at that expensive place downtown. The one with the $28 mimosas. I sat in my truck outside a coffee shop, staring at that message. The expensive place. Of course. Because nothing says my life is falling apart, quite like overpriced brunch with people who are only your friends because you all have the same yoga instructor. Keep me posted, I texted back. This is better than reality TV, Mike replied. Jenna's live texting me everything. God bless Jenna and her complete inability to read a room or respect privacy. According to the play-by-play I received over the next hour, Lauren showed up to brunch in full armor. Designer sunglasses. Indoors, naturally, because nothing screams, I'm fine, like hiding your eyes from your friends in a dimly lit restaurant. hair professionally blown out, which meant she'd hit the salon first thing that morning, dropping probably $80 to look like everything was under control. Outfit perfectly coordinated, makeup flawless, nails freshly done in that shade of pink that costs extra because it's called something stupid like ballet slipper dreams instead of just pink. She was giving full "my life is perfect and I definitely didn't just get abandoned by my husband" energy. Method acting at its finest. Her squad was already there: Melissa, Jenna, and Stephanie. The holy trinity of suburban drama. They'd known each other since college, which apparently created some kind of unbreakable bond that required weekly brunches, constant group chats, and matching Lululemon outfits. "Oh my God, Lauren!" Melissa had apparently squealed when she walked in. "Love the outfit. You look amazing." Because that's what these women did. They competed through compliments. Every "you look amazing" was really code for "I need you to tell me I look amazing too." It was exhausting just hearing about it secondhand. Lauren had slid into the booth. They always got the corner booth, like high school never ended, and immediately ordered a mimosa. Then another. Then a third before the appetizers even arrived. Jenna had noted this with concern, but not enough concern to actually say anything, because heaven forbid someone break the "we're all fine here" illusion. They'd ordered their usual spread: avocado toast with unnecessary microgreens, some kind of egg situation that cost $22 and came with a fancy French name, crab cakes that Melissa always raved about, and a charcuterie board that was really just lunch meat arranged prettily with some olives. And then came the performance. According to Jenna's breathless text to Mike, Lauren had launched into this whole thing about how I was being ridiculous and going through something and just needed space to work through his issues. His issues. That's rich. Men are so emotional sometimes, Lauren had apparently said, laughing in that way that was supposed to sound carefree but probably came out slightly manic. Max just got overwhelmed and needed to blow off some steam. He'll be back. He always comes back. The girls had nodded sympathetically, made understanding noises, probably said things like, "Men are so complicated," and at least he didn't cheat, because the bar for husbands in this friend group was apparently buried 6 feet underground. Did something happen? Stephanie had asked, because Stephanie always asked the questions everyone else was thinking but too polite to voice. Lauren had waved it off. Just a silly argument. Nothing serious. You know how Max gets about his car stuff. I made a joke, and he took it the wrong way. A joke. She was really going with that story. The revisionist history was already in full swing, and we weren't even 24 hours into this thing. They'd eaten, drank more mimosas, laughed too loud at things that probably weren't that funny, posted Instagram stories of their food with captions like, "Brunch with my girls 2 hearts," and "blessed with the best clinking glasses," because if you don't post about brunch, did brunch even happen? And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment that made all of this worth it. The check arrived. Lauren had reached for her wallet. The designer one I'd bought her for her birthday last year. The one that cost more than my first car, and pulled out her credit card. The one attached to our joint account. The one that had absolutely no money available on it because I'd made a very strategic phone call the night before. She'd handed it to the waiter with that casual confidence of someone who'd never had a card declined in her life. Someone who'd grown accustomed to spending without thinking because the money was always just there. The waiter walked away. The girls kept chatting. Lauren kept smiling. And then the waiter came back. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he'd said, looking appropriately uncomfortable because nobody likes delivering this kind of news. "Your card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Mike said. Jenna described the moment as like someone hit pause on a movie. Everything just stopped. The conversation died mid-sentence. The laughter cut off like someone pulled the plug. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade into the background as everyone at the table processed what just happened. Lauren had laughed. "Oh, that's weird. Try it again. It's probably just fraud protection." Fraud protection? Yeah, sure. Protection from fraudulent spending by the account holder herself. The waiter tried again. Came back with the same result. "I'm sorry, it's still declining." Lauren had pulled out another card. "Here, try this one." That one, also attached to an account I'd frozen. Also declined. She tried a third card. Declined. The table had gone from sympathetic silence to that special kind of secondhand embarrassment where everyone wishes they could teleport literally anywhere else. Melissa was suddenly very interested in her phone. Stephanie was studying the ceiling like it might contain answers to life's great mysteries. Jenna was texting Mike in real time, probably with way too many exclamation points. "This is so strange," Lauren had said, her voice getting that tight quality it got when she was trying very hard not to lose her composure in public. There must be something wrong with the bank system. Oh, there was something wrong with the system, all right. The something wrong was that the system was working exactly as I designed it to. Melissa had eventually saved the day, pulling out her card and saying something like, "Don't worry about it. You can Venmo me later," which they all knew would never actually happen, but at least got them out of the restaurant without having to wash dishes. They'd left quickly after that. No more Instagram stories. No more lingering over coffee. Just a rapid evacuation while Lauren muttered about calling the bank and getting this sorted out and how embarrassing and weird, and this has never happened before. The girls had hugged her goodbye in the parking lot, all doing that thing where you pat someone's back while hugging them, which is basically the physical equivalent of there. Melissa had offered to help with anything she needed. Stephanie had suggested maybe taking it easy on spending until the bank issue got resolved. Jenna had just looked concerned and confused, which was her default state anyway. And Lauren had driven home. Well, gotten an Uber home, since her car was mysteriously missing. Probably planning to call the bank and straighten out this whole misunderstanding. Probably still convinced this was just a technical glitch. Probably still telling herself that everything was fine and I'd come crawling back any minute. Meanwhile, I was parked 3 blocks from the restaurant, sipping an iced coffee that cost $4 instead of $28, watching the whole saga unfold through Mike's play-by-play texts. "Your wife just had all her cards declined," Mike texted, in front of her entire friend group. "At the fancy brunch place." Dude, I'd smiled, taken another sip of my perfectly adequate coffee, and typed back, "Huh, that's weird. Must be a technical issue." "You're evil," Mike replied. "I respect it, but you're evil." "Maybe, but you know what's more evil? Casually mentioning you fantasize about your ex during dinner and expecting zero consequences. At least my evil came with a side of justice and strategic planning. I started the Firebird, that beautiful engine rumbling to life like it approved of my life choices. Through Mike's texts, I could track Lauren's journey home. The Uber ride where she probably complained to some poor driver about bank errors, the arrival at the house, the moment she'd try to actually call the bank and hear exactly what I'd already told them to tell her. All account modifications require both account holders' consent. One account holder has withdrawn consent for all transactions pending resolution of a dispute. Please contact both parties to resolve. Good luck with that, sweetheart. I wasn't answering my phone. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mike. Jenna says Lauren just sent a text to the group saying there was a mix-up with the accounts and everything's fine. She's definitely not fine. No, I replied. She's definitely not. I pulled out of my parking spot and headed toward the storage unit where all of Lauren's favorite things were currently residing. The Lexus, the safe, all those designer bags she'd collected over the years that were technically purchased with business funds for business purposes. Time to make sure everything was properly secured. You know, just in case she got any ideas about reclaiming things that were never really hers to begin with. As I drove, I thought about her sitting in that restaurant, cards declining one after another, her friends watching her perfect life crack right down the middle. The panic she must have felt, the embarrassment, the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just Max being dramatic or sensitive or going through something. This was Max being done. And the beauty of it? This was just day 2. We were just getting started. My phone rang around 3 p.m. on day 2, and the caller ID made me actually smile for real instead of that sarcastic smirk I'd been wearing like a second skin. Eli, our son, 23 years old, graduated from college last year, working some tech job in the city that I didn't fully understand but paid him enough to have his own apartment and opinions about craft beer. Good kid. Great kid, actually. Somehow turned out normal despite having Lauren as a mother, which I considered a minor miracle on par with the 1980 Olympic hockey team. "Hey, Dad," he said when I answered, and I could already hear it in his voice. That tone, the one that said, "Mom called me, and now I'm obligated to get involved in whatever drama you two have going on." "Hey, bud," I replied, keeping it casual. "How's work?" "Work's fine." "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Straight to the point. "That's my boy. Your mother didn't fill you in?" I asked, genuinely curious about what version of events she'd presented. That your father is having a mental breakdown story? That your father is being immature narrative? Or maybe she'd gone with the classic, I don't know what happened. He just snapped approach? She called me crying, Eli said, and I could hear him moving around, probably pacing in his apartment like he did when he was stressed. Like, full-on sobbing. Couldn't understand half of what she was saying. Something about you leaving, and the cars are gone, and the bank accounts are frozen, and she can't get into the safe. Dad, she's losing it. Losing it. Yeah, I bet she was. Took her long enough. Want to know what actually happened? I asked. I mean, yeah, that's why I'm calling. Mom's version of events is. He paused, searching for the right word. Unclear. I pulled into a gas station, parked the Firebird away from the pumps where nobody could ding her, and gave Eli the abbreviated version. Not all of it. He didn't need to know every detail, but enough. The dinner conversation. The comment about her ex. The 3 years of preparation. The strategic exit. There was a long silence on the other end. Dad, he finally said, she told you she fantasizes about her ex? Like out loud. During dinner? Yep. Jesus Christ. Another pause. Okay, yeah. No, you're totally justified. I thought this was going to be one of those things where I had to be diplomatic and tell you both to calm down. But yeah, no. She deserves whatever's happening right now. That's my boy. She's blowing up my phone, Eli continued. Like, literally, every 10 minutes. Texts, calls, voice memos. The voice memos are especially rough. Lots of crying. Lots of I don't know what I did wrong, which is, I mean, she knows what she did wrong, right? You'd think, I said. But your mother has this incredible ability to rewrite history in real time. By tomorrow, she'll probably have convinced herself that I overreacted to a harmless joke. It wasn't a harmless joke. No, son, it was not. Eli sighed. That deep exhale that said he was mentally preparing himself for something. Okay, so, I probably should have told you this before, but Mom's kind of said stuff like this before. About you. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. What kind of stuff? Last Thanksgiving. Remember when you went to grab more beer from the garage? I remembered. Lauren had insisted on hosting despite my suggestion that we just go to a restaurant like normal people who didn't want to spend 3 days cleaning their house for a 4-hour meal. Her parents came, my sister Rachel came, Eli came home from school. Standard holiday nightmare. Yeah, I remember. Well, when you left the room, Aunt Rachel asked Mom something about how you guys were doing, and Mom. He paused again, clearly uncomfortable. She said, and I quote, Max is boring but reliable, like an old fridge. I sat there in the Firebird, engine off now, just processing that. An old fridge. Boring but reliable. That's how she described me to my family. To our son. Everyone got real quiet after that. Eli continued. Grandma looked pissed. Aunt Rachel asked her what the hell that was supposed to mean. And Mom just laughed it off, said she was joking. But like, it didn't sound like a joke, you know? Why didn't you tell me? Because. Eli hesitated. Honestly, I didn't want to start something. I figured you guys were fine. She was just being weird, and it wasn't worth causing a fight over. But now, with everything that's happening, I don't know, man. I feel like I should have said something. An old fridge. Boring, but reliable. The thing is, that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that she said it in front of people who loved me. In front of our son. She felt comfortable enough in her disrespect to say it out loud, in my house, during a holiday I was hosting, while I was literally in the next room getting beer for everyone. It's okay. I told Eli, even though it wasn't really okay. You were trying to keep the peace. I get it. Dad, for what it's worth, Aunt Rachel told me later that you could do way better. And Grandma said Mom was being ungrateful. They were both pretty pissed. That actually made me feel a little better. At least some people had my back, even if they didn't tell me directly. So when Mom called you crying, I said, what did you tell her? Eli laughed. Actually laughed. Dude. I told her that maybe you were finally living like she told you not to. She did not appreciate that. I bet she didn't. Yeah, she hung up on me. Then called back 5 minutes later still crying, asking if I thought she was a bad person. I told her I thought she said some pretty bad things, and now she's dealing with the consequences. She hung up again. Pride. That's what I felt right then. Pure parental pride that my son had a backbone and wasn't afraid to call his mother out on her behavior, even when she was crying and playing the victim. How are you doing with all this? I asked, because despite everything, he was still caught in the middle of his parents' marriage imploding. I know this isn't easy. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved, Eli said. You guys have been weird for years. Like, not fighting exactly, but not really happy either. Just kind of existing around each other. It was uncomfortable to watch. At least now something's actually happening. Kids notice everything. We think we're hiding it, putting on a good show, keeping up appearances for the children. But they see it all. They feel the tension. They hear the things that don't get said. And sometimes they're just waiting for someone to finally be honest about it. Yeah, well, I said, something's definitely happening now. Is this it? Eli asked. Like, is this divorce? Are you guys done? Good question. Was I done? I sat there thinking about it. About 3 years of planning. About that comment at dinner. About being called an old fridge at Thanksgiving. About all the little cuts and dismissive comments and moments of disrespect that had accumulated like interest on a debt I didn't even know I owed. Yeah, I said finally. Yeah, I think we are. Good. Eli replied without hesitation. You deserve better than someone who thinks of you as a boring appliance. That's such a messed up thing to say about your husband. It really is, isn't it? Dad, you restored a 1970 Firebird from scratch. You built a successful side business. You're in better shape than most guys half your age. You're not boring. Mom's just, I don't know, she's got issues. Out of the mouths of babes, right? Or in this case, 23-year-olds with enough distance and perspective to see things clearly. Thanks, bud, I said, and meant it. That actually helps. So what happens now? Eli asked. Like, what's the plan? The plan. That was the question, wasn't it? I had the immediate plan: protect assets, establish boundaries, make sure Lauren understood this wasn't just another argument that would blow over. But the long-term plan? That was still being written. Honestly, I'm making this up as I go, I admitted. But I've got a good lawyer, everything important is protected, and your mother is going to have to face reality sooner or later. She's going to fight you on everything, Eli warned. You know that, right? She's not going to just accept this. She'll try to turn people against you, play the victim, make herself look like the good guy. Let her try, I said. I've got 3 years of documentation. I've got witnesses. I've got legal protection. And most importantly, I've got the truth on my side. And the Firebird, Eli added. Don't forget the Firebird. I laughed. And the Firebird. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics. Yes, he could come stay with me once I figured out where I was staying long-term. No, he didn't have to pick sides, but I appreciated him being honest. Yes, we could grab dinner sometime soon and talk more. Before we hung up, Eli said something that hit harder than I expected. Dad, I'm proud of you. I know that's weird to say, but like, you finally stood up for yourself. You stopped letting her treat you like crap. That takes guts. My throat got tight. Thanks, son. That means a lot. Plus, watching Mom have a meltdown because you actually left is kind of entertaining. Is that bad? Little bit, I admitted. But I get it. After we hung up, I sat in that gas station parking lot for a while, just thinking. About Thanksgiving. About being compared to an old fridge. About all the times Lauren had disrespected me in small ways that didn't seem worth fighting over individually, but had added up to this massive pile of resentment and hurt. An old fridge. Boring, but reliable. Well, sweetheart, this old fridge just unplugged itself and rolled out the door. Let's see how you like it when the milk spoils and the ice cream melts and you realize that boring and reliable were actually pretty damn valuable traits that you took completely for granted. I started the Firebird, that beautiful engine growling back to life, and pulled out of the gas station. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. Eli won't answer my calls. What did you tell him? I smiled, deleted the message without responding, and turned up the radio. Some questions answer themselves, Lauren. Some questions answer themselves. A few days later, after Lauren had exhausted every friend, family member, and probably a couple telemarketers with her version of events, I decided it was time to go back. Not to stay, not to reconcile, not to have some big emotional conversation where we both cried and promised to work on things. None of that Hallmark Channel garbage. I was going back to deliver paperwork. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from 3 years of planning with Eddie, it's that documentation beats emotion every single time. You can't argue with properly filed legal documents. Well, you can, but you'll lose. It was a Thursday afternoon. I knew Lauren would be home because she'd posted on Instagram an hour earlier. Some quote about warrior women and rising from the ashes with a picture of her doing yoga in our living room. Our living room. That was cute. She still thought it was ours. I pulled up to the house in the Firebird, and I'm not gonna lie, I took my sweet time about it. Let the engine rumble a little longer than necessary. Let the whole neighborhood hear that beautiful American muscle announcing my arrival. Mrs. Patterson next door peeked through her curtains. Good. Let her watch. This was going to be a show worth seeing. The garage door was closed. Obviously, since the Firebird had been living elsewhere, but I could see movement through the kitchen window. Lauren, pacing like a caged animal. Her hair was in a messy bun, which for her was basically the equivalent of showing up to a job interview in pajamas. The woman who wouldn't take out the trash without full makeup was walking around looking like she'd given up on personal hygiene. That alone told me everything I needed to know about her current mental state. I grabbed the manila envelope from the passenger seat, a new one, thicker than the last, filled with documents that Eddie had prepared with the kind of attention to detail that made me understand why he charged $400 an hour. Worth every penny. The front door was locked, which was hilarious considering she'd probably locked it hoping to keep me out, not realizing that I still had my key. I could have used it. Could have walked right in. But where's the drama in that? Where's the power move? I knocked. 3 solid knocks that said, I'm being polite, but we both know I don't have to be. It took her about 15 seconds to get to the door. 15 seconds where I could hear her rushing around inside, probably checking her reflection, maybe putting on lip gloss, definitely trying to compose herself into whatever character she'd decided to play for this scene. The door opened, and there she was. Lauren, my wife of however many years it had been. Honestly, I'd stopped counting somewhere around year 7 when the romance died and the routine took over. She was wearing those expensive athleisure clothes that cost more than actual athletic equipment, her face makeup free except for some smudged mascara that suggested she'd been crying earlier. Good. Max, she said, and her voice did this thing where it tried to sound cold and controlled but came out kind of shaky instead. Nice of you to finally show up. Lauren, I replied, matching her energy but actually pulling it off. You look terrible. Her jaw dropped. In all our years of marriage, I'd never, and I mean never, said anything even remotely critical about her appearance. That was rule number 1 in the How to Stay Married to Lauren handbook. Compliment everything. Question nothing. Except that she's always right about aesthetic choices. But that handbook? Yeah, I'd burned that thing somewhere around mile marker 43 on my drive to freedom. Excuse me? She said, her hand gripping the door frame like she needed physical support. You look terrible, I repeated, slower this time, like I was explaining something to a child. Is that what rising from the ashes looks like? Because you might want to workshop that brand a little more. Her face went through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, anger, hurt, more anger, confusion, and finally settling on this kind of desperate fury that would have been intimidating if I still cared about her opinion of me. How dare you? I'm not here to argue. I cut her off, holding up the envelope. I'm here to deliver paperwork. 3 pages. You'll want to read them. Probably want to have a lawyer look at them too, but that's up to you. I held out the envelope. She didn't take it, just stared at it like it might explode. What is that? She asked. Legal documents, I said. Transferring full ownership of the Firebird to Maxwell Ford Restorations, LLC, which, as you may recall from the paperwork you signed without reading, is solely my business entity. The car was already registered there, but this makes it extra official. Ironclad, actually. Eddie's words, not mine. You can't do that, she said, and there it was, that automatic response she always had to things she didn't like. Just declare them impossible and hope reality bends to your will. That car is ours. We bought it together. No, I said, and I kept my voice so calm it probably sounded creepy. I bought it. With my money. From my business account. You just posed next to it for Instagram and told your friends it was ours because that made you look good. But it was never yours, Lauren. Not legally. Not technically. Not in any way that actually matters. She blinked rapidly, and I could see her brain working overtime trying to find an angle, a loophole, some way to turn this around. This was the woman who could argue her way out of a parking ticket, talk a retail worker into accepting a return without a receipt, convince a restaurant to remake her entire meal because it wasn't exactly what she imagined. She was good at manipulating situations. But you can't manipulate paperwork. You can't charm a legal document. And she was finally realizing that. She started, then stopped. Tried again. Max, can we just talk about this? Like adults. We are talking, I said. I'm talking, you're listening, and in about 30 seconds I'm going to leave. That's a conversation. This isn't a conversation. This is you being cruel. Cruel? I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. Lauren, you told me you fantasize about your ex during intimate moments. You called me an old fridge at Thanksgiving in front of our son. You've spent years treating me like I'm some kind of boring obligation you're stuck with instead of a person you chose to marry. And I'm the one being cruel because I'm protecting my assets. She flinched. Actually physically flinched. Eli told you about that. Yeah, he did. Because unlike you, our son has this thing called integrity where he doesn't keep secrets to protect people who don't deserve protection. It was a joke, she said weakly. No, it wasn't. And we both know it. The silence that followed was the kind of heavy that makes your ears ring. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove past. Normal suburban sounds happening around us while our marriage officially died on the front porch. Lauren's eyes started getting wet, and I knew what was coming. The tears. The ultimate weapon. The thing that had always worked before. She'd cry. I'd feel guilty. I'd apologize for making her cry even if I hadn't done anything wrong, and we'd reset the whole toxic cycle. But not this time. Don't. I said before the first tear could fall. Don't cry. Don't make this about your feelings. Don't try to manipulate me with waterworks. I'm done with that. I'm done with all of it. I'm not trying to manipulate you, she sobbed, which was exactly what someone who's trying to manipulate you would say. I don't understand why you're doing this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work on things. No, we can't, I said flatly. Because I don't want to. That's it. That's the whole reason. I don't want to be married to someone who disrespects me. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being compared to appliances and hearing about how you wish I was someone else. I just don't want this anymore. I set the envelope down on the porch railing since she still wouldn't take it. The Firebird is mine, I continued. The house is held in a trust that you'll be hearing from shortly. The bank accounts are frozen pending separation of assets. The Lexus, your car that you loved so much, is registered to my business and is currently in storage. Everything you thought was yours. It's not. Everything you thought you could rely on, you can't. And everything you thought you could control, you never could. She was full-on crying now, mascara running down her face, hands shaking. Part of me, a very small, very distant part, felt bad. But the rest of me? The rest of me remembered every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every time she'd made me feel small so she could feel big. You're a bastard, she said through tears. A well-documented bastard, I corrected, starting to walk back toward the Firebird. Thank you. Everyone's going to know what you did, she yelled after me, her voice breaking. I turned around, walking backward now, and smiled. Good. Let them know. Let them know I left after you told me you fantasize about your ex. Let them know I protected my assets before you could try to take them in a divorce. Let them know everything, Lauren. I promise you, the truth is way more on my side than yours. I hate you, she screamed. Yeah, I said, reaching the Firebird and opening the door. I'm starting to think I hate you too. Difference is, I'm okay with that. I climbed into the car, that perfect leather seat welcoming me home like always. Lauren was still standing on the porch, crying and yelling things I couldn't hear anymore over the sound of the engine starting up. I backed out of the driveway, slowly, carefully, one last time, and watched her in the rearview mirror. She'd collapsed onto the porch steps, head in her hands, the envelope sitting unopened on the railing beside her. 3 years of planning. 3 days of execution. And just like that, I was free. I turned the corner, and the house disappeared from view. My phone immediately started buzzing. Her, obviously, probably calling to scream more or cry more or try one last manipulation tactic. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Eddie. It's done, I said when he picked up. How'd she take it? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of crying. Called me a bastard. Said everyone would know what I did. Eddie laughed. Perfect. Let her tell everyone. Discovery's going to be a nightmare for her when she realizes how airtight everything is. That's what I figured. Max, Eddie said, and his voice got serious for a second. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel great right now, but you protected yourself. Most guys don't have the foresight to do what you did. Most guys get destroyed. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Now go live your life. Find someone who doesn't compare you to kitchen appliances. Set the bar literally anywhere above ground level. I laughed. Will do. As I drove away from that house, that life, that version of myself that had tolerated disrespect for way too long, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. And the Firebird? She purred her approval all the way down the highway. 2 days after the porch confrontation, Lauren decided she needed self-care. Translation: expensive salon appointment she couldn't actually afford anymore, but denial is a hell of a drug. She came home around 3 p.m., hair perfect, nails glowing like tiny weapons, attitude renewed because apparently a blowout can cure delusion. She walked up to the front door with that confident stride of someone who still thought this was her house, slipped her key into the lock, and turned it. Click. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. I watched from my truck parked down the street, sipping iced coffee like it was popcorn at a movie theater. Then, like a perfectly timed sitcom scene, a tow truck pulled into the driveway. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, and approached her with a professional smile. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said. "We're here for the silver Lexus." Lauren's face went through all 5 stages of grief in under 3 seconds. "That's my car." He showed her the tablet. "Says here it's registered under Maxwell Ford Restorations, ma'am. Got the paperwork right here." She screamed. Actually screamed. Mrs. Patterson definitely got her money's worth today. The driver loaded up the Lexus while Lauren stood there, locked out of the house, watching her car disappear. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. 72 hours after the lock incident, Lauren woke up to find a yellow notice taped to the door she could no longer open. Notice to vacate. Tenant rights revoked per trust agreement violation. Property management will contact regarding personal belongings retrieval. P.S. You left your favorite mug. I'm using it for my new espresso machine. Attached was a photo that Eddie had helped me stage perfectly. Me, Eli, and my sister Rachel posing beside the Firebird in front of my new apartment. All smiles. 0 Lauren. According to Mike's wife Jenna, bless her gossipy heart, Lauren sat on that porch for over an hour, just staring at the empty driveway where her Lexus used to be. Meanwhile, I was 70 miles away, windows down, engine humming, radio blasting classic rock loud enough to drown out any remaining guilt. When the wind hit my face, I laughed and muttered to myself. She said she fantasizes about her ex. Hope he likes installment plans, 'cause she's coming with a lifetime of debt and daddy issues. The Firebird roared in agreement, and just like that, the joke was finally, definitively, beautifully on her. Game over. I won.